the True Objective Podcast with Objectivist girl Lauren Rumpler and Liberty.me writer Calvin Thompson. The True Objective Podcast, dispelling myths about our society. Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of True Objective with your host, Objectivist girl Lauren Rumpler and Calvin Thompson from Liberty.me. Say hi, Calvin.
Hi, Lauren. Hi, everyone.
And today we have on MK Lords and Jeffrey Tucker, and this is episode 5 of the History of Money. This is the final episode because this is really the most recent currency. And so we are going to talk about how awesome Bitcoin is this entire episode because that's how good it is. We dedicated an entire episode to it. So why don't we say hi to our guests today? Hi, Jeffrey. How are you?
Hey, everything is going great. It's great to be here. I'm glad you invited me. It's really fun to be here.
We are so excited to have you. This is your first time on True Objective. But MK...
yeah, what's going on with that? I mean, so I'm glad to be here, though.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it's the perfect episode for you to start with. But MK, This is her second episode. Hi, MK.
Hey, Lauren. Good to be here. Thanks for having me on again.
Of course. We had to have you. I mean, when we think of Bitcoin, we think of MK Lords.
Thank you. It's a good association.
I think of fire, mostly.
You think of fire?
Oh, that works too. I also like that too. Fire and Bitcoin. So.
Fire, Bitcoins, and hula hoops.
Yep. Sounds about right.
And those cool pants you were wearing at PorcFest. Those were some awesome pants.
Oh, thank you.
Those songs and ballads.
So we have a lot to go over today, so we're going to go ahead and get started with the history. Take it away, Calvin.
All right. Well, the computer revolution essentially opened the gateway. Bitcoin started in 2008 after a serious advent of several online eCash protocols. But in November 2008, a guy by the pseudonym of Satoshi Nakamoto wrote a paper titled Bitcoin, a Peer-to-Peer Electronic Cash System.
The real-life superhero, right?
And no one knows his identity to this day. Does anyone have any guesses on that, by the way? Are there any major contenders that you guys are aware of?
No, and I hope they never find him. I mean, are you guys with me on this? I really hope that nobody ever figures out who he is because the ramifications for that would be horrible.
I kind of agree with that. I mean, it should always remain a mystery. It's actually funny. I was talking to Charlie Lee, the inventor of Litecoin, and I said, "Do you regret that you didn't stay anonymous? Because like everybody knows you invented Litecoin, and here you are just walking around like a normal person." He goes, "Yeah, I'd be a lot more famous if nobody ever knew who I was."
That's true.
And it's really interesting. Probably the most romantic way I've heard it put was by my friend Chris Ellis. I was talking to him about this same topic. Who is Satoshi? And he's convinced it's a woman, and he said it. He's like, I've only ever fallen in love with women, and as soon as I read the white paper, I couldn't eat and I couldn't sleep for days afterwards, and I just found that to be so beautiful.
So who is this who said that?
Chris Ellis. He's the creator of Feathercoin.
Okay, so
or not the creator. I'm sorry. He works with the team, but he's not the lead dev for that. Sorry.
Well, it's interesting because the first time I read the white paper, I couldn't understand it. And that's because I lacked the sort of the essential technical knowledge to kind of navigate what was going on. It was a very confusing thing. The other thing is that I remember reading the white paper and thinking it was going to be about money, and it turns out not to be about money. It's really about this kind of trustless system of titleable communications that are verified and timestamped, So I couldn't really figure it out. It took me about 2 years to kind of like figure out what the white paper is about. Now I read the white paper and it's just, just a model of clarity, actually.
Yes.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So what happened next? What happened after that?
Well,
Calvin?
in January 2009, the Bitcoin network came into existence. Nakamoto himself mined the first block called the Genesis block, which had a reward of 50 Bitcoins. Now, in the early years, there was a lot of inflation and deflation. It was just, it was the dawn of a new currency. It's going to be sporadic to begin with, and we're still getting a little bit of that in the current era. But the other thing of note was that on the 15th of August, 2010, somebody realized that there was a vulnerability where transactions weren't being properly verified before they were included in the blockchain.
Oh, wow.
And somebody transferred over 184 billion bitcoins, or generated them and put them in their account in 2 different addresses. And the transaction was fixed in a couple of hours, and to date, that has been the only known breach of Bitcoin protocol. Although, of course, there have been private thefts. That doesn't really affect the blockchain technology in and of itself.
Wow. Well, Jeffrey, were you into Bitcoin around this time? Do you remember this
No,
crisis?
I do remember there was a spring 2013. It didn't affect the protocol at all, but there was a fork in the blockchain that had to be introduced because, everybody in the blockchain community is very, very serious about verifying especially new blocks. So a new block came into existence that had 1 or 2 short of the proper confirmations to be introduced into the blockchain. And there was widespread, hysteria in the community. It's actually funny because this is like a very minor problem, but people are so sensitive to everything being perfectly balanced all the time that the chain was actually forked and the price dropped 10% or something like that. This would have been in April 2013. And then once the new confirmations came along and everything was properly adhered to the rules, then the new block was introduced to the chain and everything restored itself. That took the total of about 20 minutes. That was when I really gained a lot of confidence in the network. I thought, this is just amazing. The promise against double spending and for perfect verifications is actually really true. Every single second of the day, the network is constantly watched. But it's not the watching that causes it to be brilliant. It's the protocol. But I guess the point here is that the protocol can't even be hacked without people knowing it.
That's amazing.
And fixing it.
Yeah, that really is amazing. I thought that was incredible that they could tell. It was just, I'm not a programmer, so
no kidding.
But I can recognize when something seems like it's working really well because I have a lot of programming friends, which is really awesome. So MK, do you remember this happening? Were you into Bitcoin?
I just remember kind of reading about it. I wasn't super into Bitcoin at the time, but it's interesting, Jeff's point about the fork in the blockchain, and you've kind of seen some of these other things that have happened over the past couple of years, and it really shows the resiliency of the technology that when there is a problem, because Satoshi never claimed that this would be a perfect technology either. There's that humility attached to this, and with any new technology, there's going to be bugs, there's going to be problems at first, but Bitcoin is so adaptive and it's always able to kind of roll with the punches, and it really shows the resiliency of the network too. And I think that that's really going to show through, even though the price is kind of low right now. It's gotten a lot of people worried. I think that, this is a temporary situation we're going through, and I think the technology is going to emerge more resilient over time.
Agreed. And you know what? I thought it was a really good point that you made about humility. I think this is amazing because it's really a new age of currency. I've never heard of any currency having anybody back it with any sort of humility. So that was really cool to me and very unique about Bitcoin because, it's a new innovation and they recognize that it's not perfect versus, every other currency that exists where there's nothing but this currency is, so great.
And even with some of the altcoins, you're seeing a lot of that too. So it kind of, as I study more of those, it's always a big turnoff if I see someone claiming that this, is some kind of perfect. It's there are often, there are ways that blockchain technology can be improved, and there are ways, the Bitcoin protocol can be improved. But I think it's interesting that, you are seeing some of these altcoin scammers basically making the same claims, and you have to be extremely careful with all of these new people kind of coming into the space and promoting these maybe overly idealistic concepts in these altcoins. So I know a lot of them are being used as like pump and dump schemes now. I think there's a few that maybe offer some new innovations, but yeah, you always have to be skeptical when someone's saying, oh, this new technology or this new currency is going to come in and it's going to be perfect and fix all of our problems.
Lauren, I think your comment is really perceptive. I hadn't quite thought of it this way before, but one of the reasons that your local bank has these big pillars on it and looks extremely sort of sturdy and trustworthy, and that's always been the traditional way in which banks have been sort of shaped. Is to give this the appearance of confidence and soundness.
Yes.
That's why bank architecture looks the way it does.
But it's a facade.
At the Federal Reserve, and it's not. If you look at the Federal Reserve in Washington, it's the same way. It's this huge, sturdy building with big Roman columns, and it's like, oh, you can trust us, we're amazing, and then you have all the super serious Federal Reserve officials, and it's all designed to kind of give broadcast the sense that we're sound, we're confident, you can trust us. But you're probably right that the more people have to go out of their way to say that, the more you should be suspicious of them.
It's
really true that Bitcoin has no building with Roman columns or anything,
So the pomp and circumstance of it all,
So what I'm hearing is if you want a bank to really reek of stability to those in the know, it should just be a crappy old shack in the tail end of a trailer park or something like that. That's right. The conclusion I'm taking away.
It should exist on a tiny little phone with no Roman columns.
Yes, there's nothing more that says, good currency than existing on a phone.
That's right. It is funny. I think I'll use this example in the future in speeches and stuff. I think it's a really interesting point. I hadn't quite thought about that.
It's so humble. I love the currency because it's got a humbleness to it, and I think that's really contributed to its success. Is that people realize because they've been full of so much humility and pushing this currency that it's and it really they're not even really pushing the currency. It's pushing itself. Nobody's out there promoting the currency. Nobody has to stand up for it because, it was really, everybody knew that it was an experiment. And it's just, how can you honestly say bad things about an experiment, especially one that's worked as well as Bitcoin? I mean, it's had its ups and downs, but ultimately it was an experiment. And wow, for an experiment, it's quite amazing.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. The other thing that's interesting about it is that there's no audit the Bitcoin movement. There doesn't have to be because everything is completely open source. You can see exactly and nothing happens in the Bitcoin world that we don't know about instantly. Whereas we don't really know what the heck is going on in the banking system or the money system at all. I mean, we have to beg and plead the Federal Reserve for any information, and a lot of things they don't even know.
Yeah, that's true. Now, Calvin, sorry, MK, did you have something you want to say?
Oh, yeah, just a quick point. Even as idealistic as Bitcoiners tend to be, I still haven't heard very many of them, going out and saying you need to put all of your money into this because it's an absolute thing. And most of the people are very skeptical in the space and, tell people you should be skeptical even of Bitcoin. Even though we think it has this awesome radical potential, be skeptical, do your own research. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and Calvin, weren't you telling me something about WikiLeaks earlier?
Just that it really took off, Bitcoin did, when WikiLeaks and I believe it was the Electronic Frontier Foundation started accepting it. It started out with all these online organizations really pushing the envelope that first got it noticed, and then after that, everything else followed. And now we have the federal government has definitely taken notice. They've issued all their regulations, and good luck to them enforcing them, by the way.
And we'll talk about regulations a little later in the show. That's I really want to talk about that at the end. That's really something I want to end on because that's really very recent. Because they didn't even know what they were looking at the time. And what's so amazing is that this currency's really taken the entire federal government by surprise. And it's really funny to watch them scramble because they're scrambling and it's really funny. And you could tell because the BitLicense is horrible legislation. I mean, it's not even well written. And then you were saying something about the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network?
Yes. On the 18th of March, 2013, the FinCEN, I believe is how the abbreviation is pronounced. Yeah, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network issued a report basically establishing what a virtual currency is from a legal standpoint. And it was interesting that they also said that you are not a money services business unless you exchange your Bitcoins for currency or currency equivalent, although I can't imagine why you wouldn't. Essentially, there's no practical need in making that distinction because everybody's going to fall into the latter category. But again, good luck to them.
Yeah, no kidding.
That was a really bad piece of legislation, actually. It drove out of business immediately dozens, maybe hundreds of Bitcoin exchanges that might have come into existence otherwise, because it drove up the capital costs of just starting one. I mean, suddenly, you could go from just starting a Bitcoin exchange on a few $1,000s to suddenly requiring, 6 figures to get into the market at all. It was a fascinating case of how government regulation takes place in the real world. Here you had this totally laissez-faire industry where everybody was kind of jumping into it. It was just a kind of a purely competitive environment where the best product would win. And anybody could jump into it. It was really beautiful to watch, pure laissez-faire environment. And then the FinCEN regulations came along to protect the consumer or whatever. But actually what they did was just made life much more difficult for startups and ended up kind of weirdly subsidizing the people that were already in the space at the expense of those who were coming into the space. So they actually ended up sort of strangely freezing the producer end of the market. And as a student of regulation for the last 100 years, and I love reading about how it comes about and what its effects are, this is a really interesting thing to sort of watch happen. How just even, and this wasn't a big regulation. The whole regulation was like 1 page. It's just an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, but it had devastating consequences on the startup market. And the ultimate victims were the consumers, because we're being denied certain kinds of innovations we might otherwise have seen. Of course, like Bastiat said, the biggest effect of government intervention is the cost that you don't see. So it's the innovations we haven't seen in the wallet market, and the innovations we haven't seen in the exchange market and the Bitcoin, that the real cost of that FinCEN regulation. And it ultimately didn't protect any consumers at all. It just protected the incumbent, businesses that were in the space and that could afford the new capital costs. So I thought it was a fascinating case to watch.
I seem to recall reading somewhere that over 3/4 of all Bitcoin exchanges that have opened have closed down for one reason or another, and I know that's a huge portion of it right there.
Yeah, and that's going to happen anyway, even without regulations. But when the government gets involved, it just drives up the cost of doing business. That's the effect. There wasn't a single consumer protected by those FinCEN regulations. They didn't help anybody.
And if you're from... Oh, go ahead.
No, MK, I'm interested in your comments about what I just said.
And if you're familiar with FinCEN as a regulatory body, if you've ever had to work at a place where you're under these regulations, they are absolutely insane just the way they are now in regards to the existing financial services. So I work at a brokerage firm. That's my day job. And, you have to read through the regulations that you're under. There's a lot of things that restrict us from doing business with people, and specifically FinCEN related. And it's kind of interesting. They'll send these reports out every now and then, basically bragging that, oh, we caught such and such. We stopped these people from laundering, $3,000 or maybe $10,000 or maybe $30,000. So they catch a lot of these small time criminals, or not even in criminals, but unintentional criminals. These are people who maybe they didn't file a suspicious activity report. That's a felony in some cases. This is what they got Charlie Shrem on. And it's absolutely terrifying when you realize that these are not being applied to the large banks that exist now. I don't know if you all heard some of the Goldman Sachs tapes that have come out recently, but it really just goes to show you that they say they're passing these regulations to protect the consumer. But what ends up happening is the banks are protected from any kind of criticism. The regulations are applied to the small businesses and the individuals. And yeah, the large criminals, the people doing the most damage, are getting away with it. You're not seeing them throw HSBC executives in jail. You're seeing them throw a small business owner. Maybe they own a grocery store and they didn't, file a suspicious activity report, or maybe they deposited too much money or something too many days in a row.
Yeah, I think the public is jumping on board with this criticism and okay with all of it, because most people don't even understand how Bitcoin works. And that's one of the things that I really wanted to go over with you guys, because you're more technical than I am. And I figured between Jeffrey and MK, you can explain to people how the blockchain works, how Bitcoin works, like in the technical side.
I think, it's having spoken to a lot of audiences about this subject and never being given, 5 hours to explain it in detail, I try to sort of isolate the aspects of Bitcoin that I think that people are most likely to get confused about.
Okay.
And I guess one thing from my own sort of intellectual background here that stands out most strongly for Bitcoin is its non-reproducibility. This is a critical feature of money. You can't have a sort of duplicatable currency, and it's that's why gold and silver has always been money, because you can't, there's no such thing as alchemy, essentially.
Yeah, it's finite.
Actually, you can make gold in the laboratory.
So this is the thing that about Bitcoin that's actually amazing, and the thing that made me convinced that it could potentially be money was the fact that there's a strict number, and this is strictly monitored, and it can't be reproduced. That's one thing I'd always like to bring up.
Hold on. Calvin, did you say that you can make gold in a laboratory?
Yes, you can, but you need to take platinum and turn it into gold, so it's kind of a moot point.
No, you wouldn't want to do that with the prices lately.
Nope, not a good idea.
The other thing that I think people get very confused about with Bitcoin, they evaluate it just as a money alone, as if it's just an alternative to the dollar or to the euro or to the yen or something like that. That's not quite correct, although it can look like that on the outside. What's really critical about Bitcoin is that it unites its payment system with the money, the payment system in this case being the blockchain, and the payment system being the real innovation. Bitcoin just turns out to be the accounting unit that measures transactions on the blockchain. And so the value of the blockchain is actually attached to the Bitcoin, as it were. So you can't really sort of understand Bitcoin without understanding the blockchain. The blockchain itself is a kind of an amazing ledger that allows the transference of not just value, but of information bundles. Like you can commodify any kind of information. Like if I say, I love Lauren, then I can bundle that bit of information up and send it out on the blockchain, and it turns out to be time-stamped and confirmed and non-duplicatable, and it can't be manipulated to introduce sort of fraudulent information. That turns out to be an incredibly valuable service. And blockchain, as far as anybody knows, is the first technology that's actually ever been constructed specifically to do this, to sort of commodify information bundles and transport them geographically over any kind of space in a way that's time-stamped and not subject to fraud or duplicability or anything else like that. So once you understand this blockchain idea, then you can see that any kind of information bundle being ported over it that it has monetary qualities, meaning that it's it's divisible, it's fungible, it's weightless, all these sort of features, then you can see why that unit of information would obtain value. Yeah. And it took really 10 months for Bitcoin to go from, as far as anybody knows, zero value to, as far as anybody knows, having its first posted value. And that was October 5th of 2009. I think the first posted value was something like 1/15 of a penny.
Yeah, you're, what's funny is, what you're talking about is so relatable. I brought this up every episode, but, Alan Greenspan actually wrote an article when he was an objectivist called The Value of the Gold Standard. And it outlined, and I've been saying this over and over again, that Bitcoin is actually a better currency than any other currency based on this article, even gold. And so the qualities of a really good currency are imperishable, rare, homogeneous, easily stored, not subject to wide fluctuations of value, and always in demand among those you trade with.
Right. Yeah, and Bitcoin actually adds to that the fact that it takes up no space and weighs nothing.
Oh, so that one. Easily stored. Yeah.
Yeah, easily stored. Yeah. So that's kind of amazing. MK, I'd be curious about your comments on the subject in all your speaking.
Me too.
What are the aspects of Bitcoin that you like to emphasize to help people understand it better?
So something I like to keep in mind when I'm talking to people about Bitcoin is where they're coming from and what their interests are, why the technology would appeal to them. And I said this on the Bitcoin and Media panel in Coins in the Kingdom, just know your audience is what it comes down to. So if you're talking to a merchant, for instance, there are several features of Bitcoin that would appeal to them. If you're talking to someone on the consumer side, same thing. And I think a lot of people who are just going to be using Bitcoin for regular transactions, they may not be so interested in understanding the technical side of it. So I think your explanation was really good, and it's one that I always use. If you're just talking to, your average person, maybe they're interested in just using another currency. Bitcoin is basically a payment system with its own currency. So you have the capital B Bitcoin, which is the network or the protocol, the blockchain, basically the ledger it's built on. And then you have Bitcoin's lowercase b, which is the currency. So it's as if PayPal or Western Union had their own currency and they didn't charge crazy exorbitant fees, and you could send them to anywhere in the world without a middleman stopping you from doing that. So it's better, way more superior to Western Union and PayPal, because no government or individual or corporation can shut down transactions all across the network. So this is amazing. You mentioned WikiLeaks earlier, and for the same reason that WikiLeaks started taking Bitcoin, antiwar.com started taking Bitcoin, because they were concerned that, they're a controversial activist nonprofit, and when you're in that position, your funds can be cut off by a third party if they disagree with the work that you're doing. So with activists, I like to emphasize that side of things. This is something that if you're doing really, really hard work, really controversial work, people can send you money and fund your projects without people being able to stop them. If you're on the merchant side, I think the irreversible transactions is a really good feature, because a lot of times, there are a lot of scammers running around. There are a lot of people who are going to say, oh, yes, I'll pay for this, with a credit card, and it's a stolen credit card or something like that, and the fees get taken back from the merchant. So this is why where I worked at, we just now started taking credit cards, but it was something we stayed away from for several years because of the high fees, but also because there's no protection for the merchant. So this happens all the time, and a lot of times you can't fight it. If you're on the other side of it, you just kind of have to let that transaction go, and that person got basically a free product, and you have no kind of recourse. So Bitcoin's great as far as that goes. You can't reverse the transaction.
A very important point, actually, Lauren. You should think about this. This point about chargebacks is hugely important, actually. I mean, this is a massive exploitation of the producer class that goes on every day over the world, and nobody's really even talks about this. But it is an unbelievable scam. I mean, it affects everything from the local 7-Eleven to every single online dealer. It's just egregious. Did you see Orange is the New Black, like the second season? Because there's a
No, I wish I had time for TV.
Okay, so right. So Orange is the New Black, there's a character in there who's in jail for having ordered, vast quantities of things every day online, and all she did was order like these extremely expensive shoes, extremely expensive dresses and purses and bags and jewelry, and then she'd call him up afterwards and say, your product never arrived. I don't have it, so you need to take that off my credit card. And basically the merchants had no choice but to just do this, and she got away with it for years and years until it was finally caught up to her. Huh. But this goes on every day. So MK's point is extremely important. And this is like theft of the producer class that goes on in the credit card industry. This can't happen in Bitcoin, because when you trade Bitcoin, you're really trading one thing for another thing, and it's the completed transaction. It's just done. Once you do it, it's done. There's no third parties involved, no trust relationships, no massive time delays, no chance for chargebacks or scams or identity theft or anything else. This is a gigantic. I wrote an article about the chargeback problem, and I got a lot of pushback from people. People are like, well, who cares about the producer? Well, we should care about the producer, actually.
Who cares about the producer? The producer is the most important part. I mean, how are you? I mean, without producers, we wouldn't even eat. So, yeah. I mean, who cares about the producers?
But it's empowering for both parties, and this is what I like to focus on when I talk about this, because you don't have any kind of empowerment with credit card companies. If you ever read these contracts, they're atrocious and offering you no kind of protection. But with Bitcoin, it's basically consumer-initiated transactions. So instead of a third party being able to choose where your money goes, or a merchant even. So to reverse the point, a merchant can hold your credit card information and sometimes charge you unwanted fees and extra things or scam you in certain ways like that. And sometimes it's hard for the consumer to get those funds back. Usually it's easier on the consumer in a lot of ways, but in certain cases it can be very hard because that merchant has your credit card information, which is highly private, sensitive information. With Bitcoin, they may have your address, but all they can do is send money to it. They can't charge your Bitcoin address for extra fees that you didn't agree to. So it's empowering for the merchants because they don't get chargebacks, but it's empowering for the consumer because they initiate the transaction and say, I'm going to agree and send this to you.
That's really interesting.
I had not thought about that.
Yeah, I actually had a quick question for you guys because I get this question a lot. And, you know, not being a very technical person in the realm of Bitcoin, I just really like to talk about its qualities that makes it so valuable. But I don't understand the technical side of it. A lot of people are like, well, it exists on the internet. So if the internet were shut down, then it wouldn't exist anymore. But I'm told that it's actually deeper than the internet. It's something completely different. It doesn't exist on the internet. Okay, so what exactly does it exist on? Can you explain that to my audience and me?
So it can exist. Okay, so yes, it exists on the internet, but it exists in its own decentralized network. So early on, there are a bunch of different options for Bitcoin wallets out there now, but, the earliest one that you can download, the Bitcoin client that most people download, the Qt client, it will download the entire blockchain onto your computer. So the reason that Bitcoin can't be stopped by a central authority is because basically, if you've ever seen like Firefly or a Serenity, you can't stop the signal. So as long as there's one computer that's running the blockchain at anywhere, any location in the entire world, it can't be stopped. That blockchain is going to continue running. Your miners are still going to be able to mine blocks, and you'd have to be able to stop. You have to be able to, first of all, find every computer that's ever downloaded the blockchain, and then be able to get access to every computer. And somehow you'd have to stop electricity. You'd have to shut down the internet in a way that would be completely unprecedented and would actually end up hurting people like the IRS who use the internet to take money from people, and a lot of businesses. The amount of manpower and force to be able to even attempt that would be so unnecessary because it can't be stopped. There's going to be a computer somewhere running the blockchain. There are not enough government resources, even if governments combine their resources, to be able to do the type of work it would take to stop the blockchain. So as long as it's running somewhere, it's running. And it's running in millions of locations. China actually is one of the largest, they're the largest users of Bitcoin in the world. And it's the Chinese government wishes they could stop it, but they're not going to be able to either.
Can't stop us.
Isn't it also true that if there were a massive global nuclear war and everybody but just one guy was shut down and killed and everything was blown up and there's no electricity, no internet, no nothing, but then that one guy, I don't know. Okay, say it's Adam and Eve, and they have a great grandchild who discovers a hard drive with the blockchain on it that you could revive it, and the blockchain would immediately come back to life.
You're amazing.
You probably could do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd just like to point out that if you're in a society where all the internet has shut down for whatever reason, you probably have more problems on your hands than losing your Bitcoin.
That too, that was going to be my next point, is people bring up this apocalypse scenario, and it's you're not going to be worried about your Bitcoin if they shut down the internet, or if there's someone sent me an electromagnetic pulse theory thing, well, can Bitcoin survive an EMP? And it's dude, I'm not going to care about my Bitcoin if that happens. So
that's so
I love
funny.
the fact that the Bitcoin, that the blockchain, can continue to exist, even in the absence of any power. It's just, it's kind of awesome, actually, if you think about it. Just how immortal it is. It's the most indestructible thing on the planet in many ways.
Now,
more
Jeffrey,
indestructible than cockroaches or whatever.
I wanted to ask you, Jeffrey. Now, MK answered the part about the internet. Now, can you tell me why it is? Because, the second question, so they, come up with these apocalypse scenarios. We've handled that. Now, people are so worried that people are going to steal their Bitcoin. Can you tell me why that is so ridiculous?
That's actually a legitimate concern, is it not? There
have
been many things.
That's a huge issue. I mean, it all comes down to the security of the wallets themselves. And by the way, it's something of a misnomer. I mean, this stuff can be confusing, but the wallets don't actually contain your Bitcoin. What they do is contain your private key that accesses the blockchain.
Yes.
And gives you access to. But so if somebody can access your private key, then they can definitely steal your Bitcoin. And I think this is kind of a cool aspect of the protocol, that there is a finders keepers rule. There's no enforcement mechanism with Bitcoin. It runs itself. I mean, it's a true sort of anarchist society in itself. So if you steal somebody's Bitcoin, then that's yours.
So
you get it.
You would have to actually find somebody's private key in order to do this.
Well, you'd have to hack a wallet, really. And that's why you have to be really careful. And wallet technology has improved a lot. In the early days, by which I mean 3 years ago or so, the wallets were not as secure, and every once in a while little security holes would come along and people were subject to hackers and hacking. And it happened quite frequently, actually. And it's much less common now. And now you have to, so many different, there's a real market for security of your private keys.
Interesting.
But then other people I know that don't even bother with putting wallets on their phones. I mean, they truly just print out their Bitcoin on pieces of paper and lock them in safes.
That's actually what I do, but that's mostly because my phone is crap.
That makes sense.
And one thing, if I could make a recommendation for people who are interested in security, there are several really good tutorials out there, but one of the best ones I've seen is my friend Will Pangman doing an interview with Richard Grove of Tragedy and Hope. And he goes through and he walks you through the different security measures you can take. So here's the thing with Bitcoin security is there are a few simple steps you can take to make your online wallets or phone wallets a whole lot safer. But the thing is, a lot of people don't realize that they can do these things. And something I always tell people, if I set them up with a wallet, I also encourage them to look into two-factor authentication, which is sometimes as simple as checking a box on your app.
Yeah,
so it's not, it sounds scary, but it's a lot easier. And something I would also recommend, one of the most common ways that people lose their Bitcoin is their emails get hacked. And you can set two-factor authentication on your email, which I strongly recommend everyone do. In Gmail, it's super easy to set up. You just go into settings and you're able to set it up. What two-factor authentication does is when you try to log in to your email account, you have to put in your password, but it adds a second layer of protection. So it sends a phrase to your phone that's going to be on your person or another secure device that you have, and you enter in a second password to get into your account. So if even someone breaches that first line of defenses, they still need access to your phone or some kind of external device that only you would have in order to get into your account.
MK, can I ask you a question about that? Is that two-factor authentication on Google use this app called Authy, or does it send an SMS?
So the one that you can have it both ways, actually. You can do the Google Authy one, or you can have it send SMS to your phone. So Gmail gives you both options.
I have a first world problem story I can tell you about, Lauren, that will make you laugh.
Yes, I love first world problems.
Yeah, so two-factor authentication, if anybody's listening who thinks that's just weird, it just means that there's an extra step, to confirm that you are who you are. So I implemented that on my Bitcoin account. And so I was I was flying, in the airplane.
You're always flying.
Right. I was flying. I was taking a coast-to-coast flight somewhere, something like that. And I was on the internet, and I found something I wanted to buy with Bitcoin. So I clicked it, and they wanted my address, and so I put all that in. Everything was good. And then I realized I had two-factor authentication, and the code that I needed to implement it to prove that I was, who I am, was sent in the form of an SMS text message, which means I had to have a cellular connection in order to get the text.
Oh, no.
And I was up in the air without a cell connection, so I wasn't able to actually use my Bitcoin because I wasn't able to get an SMS text message.
Oh, my God. That must have been
so you can look into Authy, and there are a few other ones you can do, too. Yeah.
Right. And in the meantime, that problem is actually solved. So now there's these really cool apps that send codes for authenticating, for two-factor authentication, that send it to the internet rather than through your data cell connections. And so now I can fly through the air and use my two-factor authentication and still spend Bitcoin.
So wait, did you have to go? I mean, did you have to go an entire flight without a gin gimlet? because you couldn't do it.
I had to go a whole flight with spinning Bitcoin. It was that was just miserable.
My
you know,
God.
that is just, yeah.
You
We all have
poor
our crosses to
man.
bear.
You poor man. For hashtag first world problems.
I know the things we do for security.
Right.
Us horrible capitalists. Anyway, the point is that Bitcoin is fairly secure. I would say it's, at least as secure as, don't, put your wallet on the side of the road and expect to still have money in it. Be careful, be safe with it. Also, it doesn't exist on the internet, so stop coming up with apocalyptic, crap and giving it to us. So, at that scenario, like MK said, you won't care about your Bitcoin.
Oh, and
you'll be just
you're
trying
so
to
right,
be alive.
You are so right about the security thing. The relevant comparison is not just like perfect security versus existing Bitcoin wallet. The relevant comparison is Bitcoin security versus credit card security, which is catastrophic.
It's bad.
Have you heard?
Tens of billions of dollars are spent every year to secure this.
There's these things that you can that are going around that you can actually steal. If they have the wave pattern on it, you can actually steal somebody's credit card information through the air, unless you have like a special wallet. Did you know that?
I didn't know that, but I know for sure that there's. Poor MK knows this stupid story that I'm happy to tell you that happened to me 10 days ago or so when I was at the Bitcoin conference in Florida, of all places. That I had sort of been napping slightly, and so my phone rang, and they said it was my bank, and that my debit card had been locked. Press 1 to unlock it, so I pressed 1. They said, put in your account number, and I said okay. And this is my bank calling, right? And I said, okay. And then they said, put in your social security number. And I said, okay. And then they said, put in your PIN number. And I thought, wait a minute, something funny going on here. So I immediately hung up, right?
Yeah.
And I called my bank and I said, what the hell, have you put a lock on my debit card? And they said, no, we don't know anything about that. I immediately realized I was subject to a phishing attack.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
It's very scary.
And they have your social security number? That's awful.
I know. And, I'm not exactly stupid about these, I've written many articles on this topic.
On
I'm
phishing.
the last person you could scam with a phishing attack. But I was just a little bit groggy, a little bit trusting because it was my bank calling and it had, it all seemed right, and yet I bit. It was unbelievable. So I had some afternoon on the phone, canceling out my cards and, it was just terrible.
And you got to think about that. It's easier. They could never do that with Bitcoin. You can't fish Bitcoin. It doesn't make any sense. So, well,
the techniques they use to do that they can be a little deceptive. I will say, I think most of us who are used to seeing spam and stuff could detect the phishing attacks, but Coinbase users are targeted a lot of times. There are a few that will be like, oh, send Bitcoin to this address, or you've been locked out of your account, enter in your information here. But yeah, the important thing to remember is with Bitcoin, you are your own bank. So if you can't trust your bank now, and you start using Bitcoin, you have to be very careful with security and really, look into it and do the research and really protect yourself, because people are constantly coming after Bitcoin users now.
Guys,
too,
be adults, okay? It's time to be adults. We have cryptocurrency now. You are your own bank. Time to be an adult. And you need to do the research and learn about phishing and learn about, hacking and all of those other things and keep yourself safe. Let's all grow up and learn how to take care of ourselves, right? It's about that time. I think the U.S. is due for taking care of themselves and becoming adults.
I don't know. That's pretty scary.
That's right.
Sounds like crazy talk.
Sounds like crazy talk. Being adults? Oh my God. No way. So anyway, speaking of being an adult, so Bitcoin has been around for a while. And I kind of want to talk about what's going on with it now and the developments that are going on with it now. So we talked about safety, we talked about the history, we talked about the technical side. So what is awesome is all of these different companies centered around Bitcoin, and this is actually creating jobs. So Bitcoin is creating jobs. And so Coinbase is a big one. It's allowing people to buy and sell Bitcoins online. And Mt. Gox was another exchange platform, but it had to shut down. And, that's an interesting story. In May 15th of 2013, the U.S. authorities seized accounts associated with Mt. Gox after discovering that they had not registered money as a money transmitter with FinCEN in the U.S. So that was a big one. And then there's, obviously you can buy Bitcoin in person there's a bunch of Bitcoin meetups all throughout the world. So you should look around and look at local meetup groups and look for Bitcoin stuff. But there's definitely a lot of ways to buy Bitcoin. And so that's really the first development in Bitcoin, was being able to buy and sell it. So that's cool. And then there's the blockchain, which allows people to store their Bitcoin in a wallet. And there are many other wallets that exist as well. There's also two companies, RoboCoin and Bitcoin Addicts, which launched the world's first Bitcoin ATM on the October 29th, 2013 in Vancouver, Canada, allowing clients to sell or purchase Bitcoin currency at a downtown coffee shop. And then, of course, a local one here in New Hampshire, Llama Su, which is another Bitcoin ATM, which is worldwide. And then there's BitPay, which is really cool, a payment service provider specializing in e-commerce, B2B, and enterprise solutions for virtual currencies. And then, of course, we even have BitAngels, which are Bitcoin investors. And so this is just a few of the developments in Bitcoin. And these are all jobs that people can do. I mean, there's, programmers that are needed. There are obviously advertisers needed to get the word out about these companies. And this is creating amazing jobs for people that a lot of these can be done right at home. So a lot of people are saving money on gas, which is great because gas prices are insane. And they're able to work at home and take care of their family and, promote the world's greatest currency. So what do you guys think? What are some other companies that you guys have seen? What do you think of these companies? We'll start with MK because she doesn't talk much.
So yeah, we've definitely seen our fair share of reputable companies and disreputable companies in the Bitcoin space. Something I do caution people coming in is there's a lot of optimism that's going around, and for a good reason too. This technology is one of the most exciting innovations we've seen in decades. So the optimism is definitely founded, but you have to be very careful because there are definitely scammers who are coming into the space because they view it as an opportunity to take advantage of people. And the Mt. Gox situation was a particularly bad situation. Butterfly Labs was a mining company that really, doing horrible things with people's money, and people never got the mining equipment that they ordered. But there's been so many success stories too. Like you mentioned, blockchain.info, they just got $30 million in startup capital. They've done a wonderful job with wallet security too for an online wallet. I really love them. I think that they're going to be creating a lot of jobs. I'm really excited about the economic aspect of Bitcoin and this new counter economy that's being built, because it's great for people who maybe they feel that they've been closed off of the other economy, the kind of government manipulated economy, that's in crisis right now in a lot of areas, especially in some of the poorer areas of the country. So Bitcoin provides economic opportunity to people who could really benefit from using this technology the most. They're using their own currencies. They're able to start their own small businesses, and, they can accept Bitcoin without any barriers to entry. So this is not only creating a lot of jobs in the space, but it's also giving people the opportunity to be their own bosses and create their own jobs, yes, which is so amazing. Again, a lot of people feel that they're locked out of the regular economy. So this is great for them. I think you're going to see a tremendous amount of growth in the next few years in the Bitcoin space. And it's definitely the place to be, I think, for libertarians and anarchists who are involved in activism and want to support the counter economy. I think it's a place to be for, I'm not maybe as much a huge fan of the people who are coming and trying to make money off of it, who are doing like day trading and stuff like that. I highly recommend against doing any sort of trading with Bitcoin. I think it's highly volatile. And I think while making money is a good thing, and a lot of people have made a lot of money in Bitcoin, I wouldn't go into it with the mindset that you're going to make a lot of money and sink a bunch of your savings into it or anything like that. So I try to tell people to be cautious, as they're entering the space, but there's just so much potential for opportunity and growth. So we're definitely going to see it blowing up in the next, I would say, decade. It's going to be really, really exciting and bring opportunity to a lot of people who feel like they haven't had many economic opportunities.
And one of the big things is actually donations. So Bitcoin has caused a lot of charity. And also, do you want to tell us a little bit about Bitcoin Not Bombs?
Yes, I would love to speak about Bitcoin Not Bombs. So Bitcoin Not Bombs came out of a partnership with antiwar.com last year. So last year it was revealed that the FBI was spying on on antiwar.com, which is a terrifying thing to think about. I think everyone realizes that to some degree you're being spied on by the NSA, but to being specifically targeted by the FBI is definitely another level of fear. So what happened with this was a lot of the donors got scared out of donating to antiwar.com. So they started taking Bitcoin as a result, because there's you can add layers of anonymity on top of Bitcoin. It's not perfectly anonymous. In fact, it's fairly public, but you can put layers of anonymity on there if you're concerned about your identity being found. So Bitcoin Not Bombs came out of that, and we initially started as a launch pad for nonprofits and charities who wanted to take Bitcoin. We'd get them set up with Bitcoin and make sure that they understood it and were well secured, things like that. Free Aid was one of the very first people to go entirely Bitcoin donations. They decided to not do their 501c3 tax-exempt status as kind of a protest against that. So they've been highly successful. They did a campaign in the Philippines, which fed and clothed thousands of people after the typhoons down there in Bitcoin donations. Bitcoin Not Bombs does an annual Hoodie the Homeless project, which we're starting again, where people can buy a hoodie or a T-shirt, and those purchases, and you can also directly donate, will go towards hoodies that we hand out to homeless people in the winter. We also hand out food and other necessities too. So we did that actually, I would say Davi and Paige did that in San Francisco last year, and we're going to be expanding it to a couple other cities, one of which will be Pensacola, where I'm at. We'll be partnering with Sean's Outpost, which I'm also a part of. And Sean's Outpost is actually one of the very first Bitcoin charity success stories, too. I don't know if you all are familiar with this, but this is just amazing. Jason King started Sean's Outpost to be a homeless outreach that was fueled entirely by Bitcoin. And to date, they've delivered about 120,000 meals to the homeless people in the Pensacola area. So they had to build up trust with people, find out where they were camped, because camping has been outlawed. There's a lot of anti-homelessness ordinances in Pensacola that make it difficult to get people fed and to, have them have any kind of protection for their civil liberties. So they built up these relationships. They go out, deliver food to people every single day. And Bitcoin Not Bombs, I'm part of both of them in that regard. So there's a lot of, help. We try to help each other out.
That's amazing. That's really amazing what you guys are doing. There's another group, BitPurse, that's going to be doing a big drop on a random island. I don't think they've chosen the island yet, but it's BitPurse. This girl that has started this is amazing, Sarah Blinko, and she is awesome.
I know Sarah, yeah.
Oh, she's so awesome. And she called me and I did a show with her, and she's amazing. But I wanted to ask Jeffrey about what his favorite Bitcoin companies are, because I know this man knows pretty much every Bitcoin company out there. So I thought I'd save him for a second.
Let me just mention a shout out to Patrick Byrne at Overstock.com, who's really been leading the way. And Bitcoin adoption is the first big Fortune 500 company to adopt Bitcoin, and that was about 6 months ago. He's also now using the blockchain, working with Counterparty to start an alternative to the SEC-regulated stock market, using smart contracting for issuing shares and stuff. So that's kind of amazing. But Lauren, can I say something that's actually extremely important?
Yes.
This concerns the Women's Annex Foundation. So it's women'sannexfoundation.org. And and you can look it up, and they have a beautiful website, and you can donate Bitcoin to it. But what they're doing This is an organization that began in Iran and some other countries, and but it's specifically targeted towards Afghanistan. And what happened is that they were setting up training for women in Afghanistan who don't have any economic opportunity at all. This is a country where, Talibanish attitudes towards women are pervasive, and so they can't get bank accounts, they can't get jobs, they can't be hired by anybody really. So the Women's Annex Foundation began by training women in computer skills so they could learn programming and web design and these kinds of digital jobs so they could work around the world without having to ask permission of local tribal leaders or the controlling patriarchy, in Afghanistan, so they could experience a kind of real economic liberation. But what was amazing is that the founders of the Women's Annex discovered Bitcoin, and they found out this is amazing. This is a way because when women would get paid, they wouldn't have a bank to put the money in because they can't just walk into banks and open up an account. I mean, it's just not possible in Afghanistan. So suddenly with Bitcoin, they could actually get paid and actually get paid in Bitcoin and then spend Bitcoin online so they can develop their own women-centered economic lives and experience a kind of, economic advance that otherwise wouldn't be available to them. So this is the Women's Annex Foundation, and it's the kind of thing that Bitcoin makes possible. So we're talking about more than just a new currency. We're talking about a new path towards liberation for the whole of humanity.
I remember
way
reading
of life.
about this.
Yeah, this is incredible.
If I recall, with the same foundation, one of the other problems they found is if they paid in cash, a lot of times it would get straight up stolen. Sometimes the wives would go back to the villages, the husbands would just beat them, take their money, and they don't really have the technological capabilities to steal Bitcoin, although I would be impressed if that was the case in the mountains of Afghanistan.
No, it's amazing. And the Women's Annex Foundation has 11 giant computer media labs and schools all over Afghanistan, and they're educating as they've educated like 55,000 women to become economically independent and to actually take charge of their lives. And Bitcoin has played a huge role in this because without an independent money, you can only go so far. So Bitcoin has provided this great tool to kind of complete their mission. And so you can see that Bitcoin's become a very crucial factor in bringing freedom to people all over the world who otherwise wouldn't have it. I think we're just beginning to see this.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that, Jeff.
Yeah.
Feresh Feroz spoke at Bitcoin in the Beltway a couple months ago, and that's when I first learned about it, and I was just blown away. These are women who were risking their lives to study and to learn these skills and to even use Bitcoin. It's truly incredible.
Yeah, it's just amazing. And it really points to something very important. Money can be a tool for despotism, or it can be a tool for liberation. But it depends on what the money's made of. If it's manufactured by the state and overseen by the state, and if the state is a third party standing between you and your property, then it can be a tool of oppression. But if you get rid of that third party and really make it a market-based money like Bitcoin is, then it can become a tool of liberation that's enormously powerful and can bring down, despotic regimes like in Afghanistan, and like exists in many, many countries and places around the world. And inevitably and invariably, it's women who are the key victims here. So I love to see dedicated feminists starting to get serious about Bitcoin as an actual tool to integrate the talents and skills, minds of women all over the world into the global division of labor.
Yeah.
It's a social justice platform now. Yeah, Bitcoin is a social justice tool.
Absolutely it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. I think what has become of Bitcoin is absolutely beautiful. And we're seeing in amazing developments in Bitcoin. So in November of 2013, the University of
Nicosia. It's in Greece.
Nicosia, okay. It announced that it would be accepting Bitcoin as payment for tuition fees, with the university's chief financial officer calling it the gold of tomorrow. In December, Overstock.com announced plans to accept Bitcoin in the second half of 2014. In 2014, Zynga announced it was testing Bitcoin for purchasing in-game assets in 7 of its games. That same month, the D Las Vegas Casino Hotel and Golden Gate Hotel and Casino properties in downtown Las Vegas announced they would begin accepting Bitcoin, according to an article by USA Today. And the article also stated that the currency would be accepted in 5 locations, including the front desk and certain restaurants. So we are seeing a global unification over Bitcoin. This is a really big deal, guys. And that's why we did a whole episode about it, because people are starting to accept this as a currency. And if this can become a currency, this is one step closer to complete freedom. And I think that the only thing standing in our way at this point is figuring out how to deal with crime. And that's really it. Victim crime, not victimless crime, because victimless crime shouldn't be dealt with. But if we could find freedom in currency, if we could show the world that currency can be free and that nobody needs to be the arbiter of currency, that we could actually be free. We really could. I believe that.
You know, I don't know if we've talked about this yet, but MK and I were at a wedding this last week that was on the blockchain.
Wow.
And that was really exciting because this couple posted their vows on the blockchain, and it was very beautiful. It was a very moving ceremony. And, you know, they do this because right now when you get married, you have to go to the government. They have to give you a license, and these licenses date from the age of eugenics. Marriage has been sort of weirdly nationalized, and like anything nationalized, they ruin it, right? So it stops development. There's no more experimentation. It becomes regimented, and then it's fraught with conflict and difficulty. If we can get marriage out of the hands of the state onto the blockchain, then we begin to see development. Same thing with money. I think there's a real analogy here between money and marriage. Both have been sort of nationalized by the state for the better part of a century, with all the bad consequences of that. So this is the world's first blockchain wedding that happened, and it was actually I expected it to be kind of just an experiment and maybe a lot of fun and whatever. But as soon as the bride started walking down the aisle, I began to tear up. You know, it was so beautiful. Aww. And the exchange of vows. And when they actually posted on the blockchain, it actually seemed more serious and long lasting and like a more intense kind of promise than if you were just standing before some government, agent somewhere.
Wow. Yeah. That's amazing.
I hope in the future that anybody who really cares about freedom and liberty and wants to unite with a very special partner and some sort of a promise to each other, that they would consider getting married on the blockchain.
How did the actual ceremony work out there? Was it like, do you take her to be your lawful wedded wife, press any key to continue, or?
Well, I officiated. Okay, you were there, right? I know my sermon was too long, right? But
oh no, I thought it was wonderful. It was great. You did a great job.
I teared up a couple of times. Do you want to explain how it works?
Yeah. So basically, they put their vows on the blockchain as a message, which you're able to do when you send a transaction from one address to another. You are able to attach a message, and it'll be a small amount of data within the blockchain. Like Jeff mentioned earlier, the blockchain can also be a store of data as well. Now, there are limits at the moment. I think some of the issues they're having is they don't want to add too much data storage on top of the blockchain because there might be some scaling issues and things like that. But you can put small messages on there, and they put their vows on there. And it went really well.
And heaven forbid the marriage goes south. Is there a protocol for Bitcoin divorces? Would be my next question.
You could put a document on there. So kind of a cool development with blockchain technology that's maybe outside of money is the idea of smart contracts. And I would highly recommend looking up Pamela Morgan in this regard. She does some amazing presentations on smart contracts. And this is such a cool feature because, whether it's a marriage contract or a divorce contract or even a corporate contract, this is really cool. You can basically have these accounts that are, multi-signature accounts to where funds can't be taken and run off with. This is like corporate accountability stuff. So a lot of times you hear of, a CEO or something running off with a bunch of the company's money, and there's really not a whole lot of recourse for people. There's not much they can do, unless they, of course, track the person down and all that. But people get away with stealing vast amounts of money from their corporations all the time. And when you have these, you could put smart contracts in place along with multi-signature wallets, which all that means is it requires a majority of signatures to release the funds from the wallet. So maybe it's like 2 out of 3, or, some type of odd number, so you wouldn't be in a, gridlock there. But that stuff is really interesting to me. And yeah, it's kind of the same thing. I mean, you can do this with divorce too. You can, draw up a contract and, have assets split evenly. This is very far in the future. Some of this we're not quite there yet. Obviously, there are a few different projects that are trying to kind of hasten, these other potential uses of blockchain technology, but it is being used in corporate governments right now at the moment. Law firms are starting to use it. So it's very much being practically applied.
Well, it seems like these two...
Can I ask you a question about that? I mean, I have a lot of questions about smart contracting. I feel like I'm just now sort of learning about it, but you'd mentioned the problem with sort of too much cruft on the Bitcoin blockchain, right? So that there are sometimes restrictions on sizes of notes, and sometimes third parties like blockchain.info and Coinbase will actually turn off attachments for that reason, as I understand it. So some of these corporate-based smart contracting, like Counterparty and some of these other things, are they developing separate blockchains that are just devoted to issuing equity and doing futures and this sort of thing, or are they using the Bitcoin blockchain? It's an obvious question, but I'm not sure I immediately know the answer.
I believe a lot of them are developing their own blockchains to use for this matter. Some of them may be adding a layer on top, but I think some of them are developing their own. I read so much about it, I sometimes get names mixed up, so I can't say for sure who are the ones developing their own and who are still using Bitcoin. But yeah, they're going in both directions.
Okay. That's really interesting. I'm actually learning a lot from this conversation, so thank you.
Awesome.
Those two sound like they're very heavily invested in Bitcoin. I hope they signed a Bitcoin prenup on the blockchain too.
Yeah, that's right. What's funny is, I guess you could say, and people said this to me, they go, well, that's not a real marriage, right? But, I think what's real, we make a mistake if we think something because the government approves it, that makes it real. And if it's outside of government, that's not real. I mean, I don't, in terms of relationship statuses and things like this, 10 years ago, nobody ever heard the phrase Facebook official, right?
I know.
But now, Facebook official is a kind of a big deal, right?
Yep. Yeah, it really is.
Well, this is the first one that's blockchain official, and that's going to mean something eventually.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's so free market. It's awesome. I love this thing. So I'm definitely, if I ever decide to get married, and that's a big if, I will definitely get a blockchain marriage. That is awesome. I have to do that.
Awesome.
They beat us to it because Joseph and I were considering doing a similar thing, and they jumped in ahead. But it's all good. I'm glad someone was the first to get in there and do it.
Hey, awesome. You know that I'm always available for blockchain weddings. So.
I know.
Yeah, Jeffrey. By the way, now
all right, definitely.
I think
I'll do a
more
blockchain
sold.
bar mitzvah too. So if anybody's listening.
I've got options.
I think I'm more sold on getting married now because Jeffrey could officiate my wedding.
That's a feeling, doesn't it? Yeah.
That's pretty wonderful.
Yeah, marriage has this problem, and I don't know. It's a very interesting thing. I know, Lauren, you've done a lot of work on the subject. And I haven't really written about it much, but it is intriguing to think through all the ways in which our marriages and these kind of contracts and family life and everything have been strangely distorted because of government intervention. Actually.
Yes. I've done quite a bit on that. We
don't know. But one thing that if you look at the sweep of history, it's like anything government touches gets all screwed up over time, And that's just true with everything, education and security and, everything else. And so I assume that this is also true with marriage. I think there's a kind of a moral urgency to getting it out of the hands of the government. And I don't know about you, but I'm kind of sick of this kind of big national debate about should we have gay weddings or not? It's like, shut up and let people do what they want to do,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the only reason we're not doing that is because the government's in control of it. It seems like the obvious answer is to take it away from the state. And then the answer will present itself, And that's the peaceful and beautiful solution to social conflict, is just to get it out of the hands of government. And then everybody can just live their lives as they choose. It seems like the right way.
It makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, and with marriage, too, it's something that is based in love, but the reason a lot of people think that government should be involved in marriage is dividing up property in the case of a divorce. You know, there's a lot of that involved, and that function of it can be solved with blockchain, too. I mean, you can make a contract at the beginning, and, you know, right now you have the state involved, and they pretty much bring the hammer down and say everything's going to be split 50-50 in most cases, and, you know, or maybe split in other unequal ways. A lot of times they kind of use a broad brush to paint all relationships. And there's a lot of inequalities in the system when people get divorced. So, you know, maybe some of those could be smoothed out over time.
Yeah.
Well, at least we'd have some market experimentation, which is another way of saying at least we'd have society, meaning it's individuals in charge of their lives again, which it's not working out when we're not in charge of our lives. In some ways, government has just really harmed marriage. And if you look at like the history of marriage licenses, it's actually just so creepy and shocking when you discover it. You know, when you find out the real underlying history of this, it was all about exterminationist policies. It was government trying to prevent people from procreating so they could exterminate them in one generation. And it's actually just amazing.
That's true, actually.
So I decided to go ahead and make the show a little bit longer because we haven't finished covering everything. So I want to jump to regulation, which is our last topic. So right now the government has finally figured out what a serious problem it will be for them if Bitcoin is able to take off. So, of course, they have started to retaliate. First, Mt. Gox, and which we already talked about. And then on June 23rd in 2013, it was reported that the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration listed 11.02 Bitcoin as a seized asset in a United States Department of Justice seizure notice pursuant to 21 U.S.C. It is the first time a government agency has claimed to have seized Bitcoin. So they seized the Bitcoin. And then in July of 2013, a project began in Kenya linking Bitcoin with M-Pesa, a popular mobile payment system, and an experiment designed to spur innovation payments in Africa. During the same month, the Foreign Exchange Administration and Policy Department in Thailand stated that Bitcoin lacks any legal framework and would therefore be illegal, which effectively banned trading on Bitcoin exchanges in the country. According to Vitalik Buterin, I think, a writer for Bitcoin magazine. Metallic. So a writer for Bitcoin magazine, Bitcoin's fate in Thailand may give the electronic currency more credibility in some circles, but he was concerned it didn't bode well for Bitcoin in China. And then on August in 2013, federal judge Amos Mazant, okay, in the Eastern District of Texas of the Fifth Circuit ruled that some Bitcoins are a currency or a form of money, specifically securities as defined by federal security laws, and as such were subject to the court's jurisdiction, and Germany's finance ministration subsumed Bitcoins under the term unit of account, a financial instrument, though not as e-money or a functional currency, a classification nonetheless having legal and tax implications. In October 2013, the FBI seized roughly 26,000 Bitcoin from website Silk Road, which we all know about, during the arrest of alleged owner Ross Ulbricht. And then we'll cover BitLicense, but I'll give you guys a chance to really vent about 2013 and what it has been like for Bitcoin. Poor Bitcoin.
Just a comment just quickly on this, and then I'll turn it over to MK. But I find it interesting, the government's attitude towards this, because if it had been 2009 or 2010, the government never would have grabbed any of this, math.
They had no idea.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't worth anything really back then.
But now they're freaking out.
Changed in the slightest bit. It's in a weird way. It's a kind of a fascinating look at the way government functions. Okay, so you have this exact same Bitcoin. There's no difference. The protocol hasn't changed. 2013 versus 2009. The only change has been the trading ratios of Bitcoin to goods and services or other currencies. And so when it gets valuable enough, suddenly the government decides it wants it, and it's going to call it currency. I find that really interesting. In a strange sense, Lauren, I think that there is a kind of an unintended consequence of government's confiscation of all this Bitcoin, because it's like they broadcast to the world, this stuff is so valuable that we want it.
That's what they did. And everybody can see through the fact that it's all about them trying to get their slice of the pie, which they stole from the people who paid for it.
Yeah. That's really true.
They alerted everybody. I mean, they're idiots. I mean, that was so dumb.
So, and it's truly true that if Bitcoin falls down to $1 or 50 cents or 20 cents or 10 cents, which it could, we will see no more pressure for regulation. It'll all just vanish. So this is really about, the government trying to wet its beak, as they say in the old days. So.
I love that Bitcoin's on sale right now. Yep.
Well, what's interesting about that? I'm just a quick comment about that. By the way, it's less on sale now than it was last week. It's approaching $400 again.
I should have bought. I was hoping it would fall to like $100, and then I'd be like, no, I'm gonna buy like 26 Bitcoin.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that's fascinating to me about the price movements is I hadn't anticipated this, but all the mass adoption that we've seen in 2014 has actually driven down the price, because it's led to more sellers, because most of the big businesses in the Bitcoin space now receive Bitcoin and immediately convert it to dollars. So you've got a lot of selling pressure, and that's what drove the price from $1,000 down to, I guess it's low of $275 or something like that.
Wow.
So the merchant adoption is putting downward pressure, and that's countervailing the pressure of, adoption of Bitcoin. So it's, another way to put it is that it's supply and demand, essentially.
Yeah, and so what I find it interesting is, despite all of this scary talk about regulation, is it hasn't really deterred merchants from taking Bitcoin. We've seen massive merchant adoption this year, and I think you're going to continue to see that. I think there are a few exchanges and a few companies who are actively lobbying for more regulation because they think it will clarify, their position. But I think that is fancy language for, we want regulations that will allow us to do what we want to do and prevent competition in the industry, because that's usually the end result of regulation. So it is kind of interesting. I think it's, I used to be very much bothered by this, all of the negative media attention that Bitcoin gets, but I kind of find it fascinating. And to me, the more they're talking about it, and the more they're trying to stop it, and the more attention they're bringing to it, and getting more people talking about it. So it's kind of backfire. Their goals of trying to suppress this technology by trying to scare us with it, with ridiculous interviews and just ridiculous scenarios, has only brought more attention onto it. So you're hearing many more people talking about it now. Even if they're hearing Bitcoin in a negative sense, there's still that earworm that's being planted in their mind, and they're still like, wait a second, I keep hearing about it. Maybe I should look more into it.
I totally agree with that. I completely look what happened to file sharing after Netflix was shut down.
Right? Yeah.
Look what happened to pot after Richard Nixon made it illegal.
Yeah. Well, Napster and, all of these other.
What did I say? Netflix? Yeah. I meant Napster, of course. Not Netflix.
That's okay. Yeah.
We're rebels. I mean, Americans, the world in general. I mean, people are rebels. They like things that are illegal. They like things that we're not supposed to have. And the more that they do this, the more we're going to rebel, and the more that we're going to do, and the worse it's going to get for them. They might as well just sit back in their comfy little chairs and enjoy it for now, because the government isn't going to last much longer. Technology is taking off, and we can pay for all of it in Bitcoin.
Yeah. Beautifully said, Lauren. I completely agree with you. Humankind will not live in a cage. We will escape. And that's exactly what's happening now.
What's in your wallet?
The space between the bars is getting ever wider all the time. And that's what's wonderful.
Yep. So the last really big regulation, and I know we're going to want to talk about this, so I want to cover this, is BitLicense. So the New York Department of Financial Services has released a copy of proposed codes, rules, and regulations for companies that buy and sell Bitcoin and other virtual currencies roughly a year after the agency announced an inquiry into regulating Bitcoin. The proposal, which outlines requirements for a special BitLicense, will be entered into the record on July 23rd. The proposed rules apply to businesses that buy, sell, transfer, store, or maintain custody or control of customer Bitcoins, as well as companies that covet fiat currency to virtual currency on behalf of merchants. This will also apply to companies that convert. Am I saying covet? Convert virtual currencies into other types of virtual currencies, as well as issue virtual currency. They do not apply to Bitcoin miners, the programmers who maintain the Bitcoin network in exchange for virtual currency. Under the proposal, companies with a BitLicense must hold in reserve an equal amount of virtual currency and in the same type of virtual currency as their customers deposit. They must also keep records on their customers' real names and addresses, disclose to customers the risk of using virtual currency, and report suspected fraud. They must also appoint a compliance office and a computer security officer, among other provisions. The rules also leave some questions undecided, such as how much capital a virtual currency business must keep on hand. And this is really the latest regulation for Bitcoin. So yay, New York.
Yeah, so this regulation is really, 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 really bad.
Yep.
It's very similar to how they try to regulate financial service providers now, and it's applied to exchanges. So this is really the hardest way they can regulate Bitcoin is by regulating the central point of failure, which is exchanges at the moment. And the response has already been, these haven't passed yet. They've extended the commenting period, which I always say that is a nice gesture, but they don't really care what our comments are about it. Obviously, this is horrible, horrible legislation. And what it's going to do is just limit business in New York. It's going to limit the ability for exchanges to open up, for new altcoins to be made, for all this. So it's going to end up hurting the state of New York, and you're going to see a lot of people who maybe were interested in starting a business leave.
They're not going to want to start a business in New York. I wouldn't want to start a business in New York. Nobody's going to want to trade with anybody in New York, not with Bitcoin.
And it even applies to, it's very broad sweeping. I mean, some of the requirements, you read a lot of them, and some of them are just appalling. They're even worse than, what you read there. And what it comes down to is that's the only way they can't stop the network. They can't stop Bitcoin from being transferred, but they can regulate the exchanges, which are, cashing Bitcoin in and out and transferring it. So a lot of companies have opted to not do business in the U.S. Some people think that more states are going to follow New York because New York is often a trailblazer in the most awful legislation ever. I think you'll see a few states adopt it, but I think you're going to see a little more caution from most of the states. They're going to wait and see what the repercussions of this are, and the obvious repercussions will be that New York is going to suffer terribly economically from this rapidly growing industry.
Yeah.
Okay, can I ask you a question that's specifically about this? Because you made some opaque comments earlier that I didn't want to follow up on just in this session, but now you've raised this, so I feel like I kind of want to. And you would know about this a lot more than I would. With regard to industry support or opposition to these kinds of regulations, I guess I would ask, are you aware of any existing Bitcoin company who supports this BitLicense? And if not, what kind of regulations are you familiar with that industry leaders are willing to support? And are you willing to give names of specific companies?
So I think there's a lot of kind of division right now in industry leaders over this, and I'm not as tightly connected to that sector of Bitcoin. The kind of interesting thing with Bitcoin is it allows you to be active in so many different aspects of it. So I'm not as well connected with the industry people, but I don't know of any companies right now that are actively supporting the BitLicense. pretty much all of the ones that I've seen, whether it's exchanges or people like the Bitcoin Foundation or Center for Digital Chamber of Commerce, are all actively opposing this. They've written open letters and direct letters to the regulators and to Ben Losky saying, we don't want this. We think it's going to crush innovation before it even has a chance to set off. So I think overwhelmingly it's negative, against BitLicense. There may be a few people, again, I wouldn't really know exact names. I know sometimes you hear like the Winklevoss twins, for example, they tend to be on the side of kind of pro-regulation, but in a more clarified sense, not in the BitLicense sense, but I think they do want some regulation on exchange that's maybe a slightly watered down version of the BitLicense. The BitLicense is very extreme. It's much more extreme than some of the existing regulations on money transmitters. So
So my general impression looking back at the history of regulation is that it really does fall into two camps. There's regulation that's actually anti-business. They just want to crush commerce and they want to destroy it and destroy progress. There's that kind of regulation. And then there's another kind of regulation that's kind of pro-business regulation that just seeks to benefit the dominant players in an industry at the expense of startups. And those kinds of regulations you see industry historically cooperating with and even advocating, right? Mm-hmm. So BitLicense would fall in the former category, and maybe certain know your customer laws and that sort of thing might fall in the latter category.
I think so. I think that's a good distinction to make because, again, there's not a whole lot of people who are actively supporting the BitLicense as it stands now. There's some who want some consumer protections put in place from an exchange perspective, but overwhelmingly, I think there's a lot of opposition to it, and I think the way they're written now will only serve to kind of crush industry. And if there are any exchanges that are for it, which again, I haven't heard any, but if an exchange does come out and say they're for it, I would be highly suspect of that exchange. It's interesting. So exchanges we've seen a lot of hacks with them, and that's how they're going to sell this to people is, well, we're going to protect people from hackers and we're going to force them to have a certain amount of reserves, that in Bitcoin. So people, won't lose their money completely. But I don't know. I don't really see it being effective from a consumer protection standpoint, and I don't know that there's even a whole lot of support. I think a good talk to watch on it is Andreas Antonopoulos. He recently spoke in front of the Canadian Senate, which the Canadian Senate has been really actively watching Bitcoin. They've had, I think, 13 hearings now on Bitcoin, and he made an excellent case for allowing innovation to thrive because I don't know that there are a whole lot of exchanges right now that have the type of power in the market to lobby for these regulations to stop competitors. It's a highly competitive market, and I don't know that any of them have really gained a foothold enough to be able to say they want these regulations, to stop innovation. I think everyone's innovating at around the same speed, and these would just completely try to stop anyone from being successful.
Yeah, I gotta say, I just want to point out to the businesses in New York that if they're not going to stand up against this, they're doing themselves a disservice. New York is one of the business capitals of the world. They are making a huge mistake. They're going to lose that status if people feel like when Bitcoin finally does take off, because it will take off, when it takes off, they're not going to be able to exchange. No one's going to want to exchange with them in Bitcoin. And that is a huge, huge detriment to them. And so any business that is operating out of New York really needs to fight this. This is really, really imperative. And I think a lot of them don't realize what is going on because a lot of them don't realize what Bitcoin is. But this is going to be a big deal in the near future.
Something I've always wondered is every time you see a overarching regulation or a prohibition especially, you never get rid of an industry. You just drive it underground. That's been the case with alcohol prohibition, the war on drugs, all that good stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So,
that's a good point.
It's been
going to be a thriving
electricity, internal combustion, and all the way back to the invention of the bridle and the horseshoe and the eyeglasses. So you're exactly right.
So what will that mean if Bitcoin is driven underground in a particular area? I know, what was it? Dread Pirate Roberts, and I'm drawing a blank right now. The
Russ Holbrook.
Yeah, Silk Road. Yeah. I know they were using Bitcoin pretty heavily. So are businesses like that going to be affected at all by like New York's regulation, or will they?
I don't know how you can stop it. I mean, if you have Bitcoin and you want to send it to somebody, I just don't know how that's affected by the regulations, really. I think probably, in a lot of countries that are socialist, meaning heavily regulated, that's another word for
like
socialist.
All of them, you mean?
Yeah, I mean, like in Brazil, what happens is you've got a huge, thriving underground economy. It's gigantic. But when you get to be of a certain size, meaning that you're very, very, very successful, that's when the regulations kick in, and that's when they want to kill you. So I assume that it would be the same way in the Bitcoin world. That if the more they regulate, the more you just get this kind of widespread darknet underground economy. The other thing is that Bitcoin is not a national currency. I mean, God, what the hell? I mean, regulations are national regulations. Like wherever the government jurisdiction is, that's what it applies to. Bitcoin is a global currency. There's no government that can regulate the whole globe. So people who have Bitcoin will just end up spending them, outside the border. I mean, it's not a complicated thing. I mean, I do this all the time. I buy things from all over the world with Bitcoin. I don't care anymore about geography. Bitcoin kind of liberates you from this weird thing. And then you have these dopey regulators, these nation state apparatchiks and their idiotic thrown back dinosaur ways, attempting to control our behavior. We no longer give a shit about these people, actually. They don't matter to us anymore.
And there it goes. Every episode, I like to point out the point where it goes from me being able to mark it as a clean episode.
Sorry.
No, it happens. Yeah. It happens every single episode. It's great, though.
It's kind of a miracle it lasted this long. Honestly. Especially given our company.
I know.
The S word. I'm starting to introduce the S word more commonly in my vocabulary.
That's okay.
I was just in New York.
Now that the line's been breached, we don't give a shit. Really.
Yeah. Now we don't give a shit. Everybody doesn't give a shit.
I was at a rice pudding shop and they use the S word in their advertising signs. So I figured I can use it.
Now everybody, you can say shit. It's okay now.
You can say shit. Right.
So anyway, the episode has gone on for an hour and a half, and so I am, in the interest of keeping this podcast relatively short, we are going to go ahead, and I would say that if you wanted to know anything about Bitcoin, you should just listen to this episode. I don't think there's anything we really haven't covered. Is there anything you guys feel like has been left out, needs to be said about Bitcoin?
Well, both MK and I could talk about Bitcoin for 48 straight hours. But
That's true.
We've done pretty well.
I think we haven't had a random factoid like you've been throwing out every week, and I got one.
No.
Do you know what Mt. Gox originally stood for?
What?
Magic the Gathering online exchange.
Online exchange.
Yep.
What? Random fact, and it was Calvin this week. So, guys, we wanted to go ahead and announce what our next series is going to be. And we are so excited about this. It's been so hard to hide it from you guys. And we're so excited. I'm going to let Calvin tell you what the next series is. And then I'm going to tell you who the guest is going to be.
Okay. Did we decide on how long it's going to be? 4 or 5 parts.
4 or 5 parts.
Anyway, it's going to be the top 44 worst presidents in United States history.
From least undesirable to most undesirable, because none of them are desirable. So we are going to do all of these presidents in that order, and we are going to have a very special guest. The old co-host of True Objective, Carlos Morales, is going to be joining us for this series, and we are so excited to have him back. And so that's our big announcement, and we hope you're as excited as we are for the next series. And we hope that you loved the History of Money series. So thank you so much for tuning in to the True Objectives History of Money series. Guys, do you have anything you want to pitch where people can find you?
Give us your spiels.
Yeah, give us your spiels.
I'll say something wonderful about Liberty.me, which is our fun community of finding ways towards liberty. It's been getting so much attention recently, and I'm so excited about it because the success is just, really fun. I'm very proud of it. When I kind of threw myself into this, I knew that it would either fail or succeed, and I would either be a genius or an idiot. I'm not a genius yet, but it's the thing is succeeding, so I'm really proud of it.
Idiot savant, perhaps.
Sign up. We have a couple of wonderful Bitcoin reports there, so you can sign up for a 30-day free trial, and I'd love to see you over there.
That's exciting. MK?
Yeah, you can find my stuff at bitcoinnotbombs.com. We just recently launched our hoodie, The Homeless Project, so definitely check that out. You can make donations or buy a hoodie or a t-shirt. Just MK Lords on YouTube. I do a weekly show called Crypto Convos, which is an interview show about cryptography, cryptocurrencies, basically all things crypto. So check that out too. And I'm MK Lords on all other social media.
And Calvin, where can they find you?
Well, I write on Liberty.me on occasion. It is a great platform and everything a social media site should be, including being completely swamped by anarchists. Yeah. Pretty much
Awesome. Awesome. And so we hope you guys will tune in for the next series. Thank you for tuning into True Objectives History of Money series. We hope you enjoyed the finale, and we want to know what's in your wallet. So tune in next week at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And of course, check me out at objectivistgirl.com or objectivistgirl without the I in girl, on YouTube. Girl. We do this every episode. And, or you can check me out on Facebook at Objectivist Girl. And of course, you should check out the Objectivist Girl live show at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Voluntary Virtues Network. And we'll see you next week at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the President series with Carlos Morales. So what's in your wallet, guys?